welcome to the Plain Books Podcast.
It is great to be here for this one.
So imagine, just for a second, that you are this highly decorated admiral in the mighty Ottoman Armada.
Yeah.
The year is 1565.
Right, the height of their power.
Exactly. You are sailing through the Mediterranean, projecting the absolute power of your empire. And suddenly the fog lifts, and you are staring directly at this massive, imposing enemy fleet anchored right near the island of Malta.
Which you are not expecting at all.
You are completely unprepared. Strategically, it's a nightmare. But conceptually, it is just such a profound shock to your expectations that your mind simply refuses to process it.
It breaks your reality.
It totally breaks it.
Yeah.
So what do? According to this historical legend, you don't sound the alarm. You send a desperate reality-denying message back to the Sultan in Istanbul. You just write, Malta yoke.
Malta does not exist.
Malta does not exist. I mean, it's crazy.
It's a remarkable piece of history, and, it serves as the foundational metaphor for the incredibly complex, highly controversial worldview we are exploring today in this episode.
Yeah, because today we're looking at the book Architects of Deception by Jüri Lina.
Right, and the author uses that exact phrase, Malta yoke, to describe how he believes modern authorities and even independent historians honestly react when they stumble upon data that shatters their accepted reality.
They just close their eyes.
They close their eyes and declare that the data simply does not exist.
And Lina applies that metaphor to almost everything we think we know about history, science, and global politics. I mean, today we are taking a massive journey through his expansive alternative history of the world.
We really are.
But before we get into the secret societies and suppressed technologies and altered timelines, we really need to lay down some crucial ground rules for this conversation.
That is absolutely essential. We have to be clear here. Architects of Deception contains highly controversial, politically charged historical and political claims.
Very charged.
Yes. So it is vital to clarify to you, the listener, that as hosts, we are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on any of the viewpoints presented in this text.
Right. We're just the messengers.
Strictly impartial guides. We are here to help you navigate and understand the arguments, the narratives, and the underlying logic exactly as they are laid out in Jüri Lina's book. We are mapping the territory of his claims, not advocating for them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you want to understand Jüri Lina's territory, you have to first understand the lens through which he believes the vast majority of the human race views the world.
Which is pretty bleak.
Yeah, he basically argues that we are almost all suffering from a sort of global multi-yoke syndrome.
Right. The book leans heavily on a psychological concept called the consensus trance, and this term was originally coined by Charles T. Tart.
He was a psychologist.
Yes, a prominent psychologist who studied altered states of consciousness. Now, in the context of this book, the consensus trance isn't some mystical hypnosis with a swinging pocket watch.
It's not a magic trick.
No, it is the idea that human society collectively accepts a fundamentally false, deeply manufactured conception of reality.
And we just go along with it.
Exactly. And the key mechanism here is that we don't accept this reality because we've logically examined the facts. We accept it because we have undergone intensive, lifelong conditioning from the moment we are born.
It makes me think of how a computer operating system works. If you try to open a file format that your computer doesn't have the software to read, it doesn't matter how real that file is, the computer just shows you a blank icon.
That's a great analogy.
And the book actually gives a visceral, almost unbelievable example of this kind of perceptual blindness. Lina points to Charles Darwin's journals from his time aboard the HMS Beagle.
This story is wild.
It really is. The book asserts that when this massive, towering European ship arrived off the coast of South America, the indigenous Patagonian tribes on the shore literally could not see it.
They physically couldn't register it.
Right. Optically, the light was hitting their retinas, sure, but cognitively, a vessel of that staggering size was so far outside their consensus reality that their brain simply filtered it out as background noise.
And the author details how, according to this narrative, only the shaman of the tribe could actually perceive the ship at first.
Wait, why just the shaman?
Because by the very nature of his role in the tribe, his mind was routinely stretched beyond the rigid boundaries of everyday perception. He was, accustomed to looking for things that weren't supposed to be there.
So he was sort of immune to the trance.
In a way, yes. The book explains that the shaman had to meticulously observe the ship and then translate it to the rest of the tribe using familiar, everyday concepts.
Like breaking it down for them.
Right, like comparing the massive masts to trees and the sails to stretched animal skins. And only after he provided them with a conceptual bridge did the ship miraculously materialize into the tribe's visual field.
So Lina is arguing that modern humanity is essentially the Patagonian tribe on the beach.
That's exactly his point. He claims we are staring out at an ocean of massive structural manipulations and global conspiracies, but we literally cannot see the giant galleon offshore because the authorities have programmed our operating system to only recognize tiny rowboats.
And the author contends that this programming extends backward in time, all the way to the very bedrock of human history. The book claims that much of what we consider settled history is entirely fabricated to maintain this trance.
Like what? What's an example he gives?
Well, he cites Zeev Herzog, a professor of archaeology at the University of Tel Aviv. Herzog made waves by claiming that after decades of exhaustive excavations, the archaeological record simply does not support the biblical epic in Egypt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Lina uses Herzog's assertion that the Exodus never happened as evidence that foundational cultural narratives are often just engineered myths.
And he doesn't just stop at ancient Egypt either. He goes on to claim that entire civilizations have had their identities stolen and rewritten.
Vandals are a huge part of this. Yes, I found the book's narrative about the Vandals absolutely fascinating. Historically, we use the word vandal to describe someone who mindlessly destroys property.
Right, graffiti and smashed windows.
Exactly. We are taught they were these bloodthirsty barbarians who sacked Rome. But Lina asserts that the Vandals were actually a highly civilized, advanced Nordic people who originally came from Scandinavia.
The book argues that these Nordic Vandals possessed a deeply rich culture and a set of religious beliefs that were viewed as a profound threat by the rising power of the Catholic Church.
Because they were too independent.
Precisely. Because they couldn't be easily assimilated or controlled, the text claims that the Byzantine Empire orchestrated a campaign to completely erase them from the face of the earth around the year 534.
But wiping them out physically wasn't enough for the empire.
No, they had to be wiped out conceptually. So the book claims the victors completely rewrote history, branding them as mindless savages to ensure no one would ever look to their culture for inspiration. It is the ultimate example of reality manipulation.
But wait, if I put myself in the shoes of someone trying to process this, being in this consensus trance sounds like being a lifelong actor in an elaborate global stage play.
A play you don't know you're in.
Right. You're standing on stage, and everyone around you agrees that the painted canvas behind you is a real mountain, and the wooden floorboards are a real forest. But the second you break character and point out the stagehands in the wings pulling the ropes, everyone else in the cast genuinely thinks you've lost your mind.
They think you're crazy.
Exactly. Which begs a huge question. If this conditioning is as absolute as the book claims, how does the author expect any normal person to actually wake up and break free from an illusion they don't even know they are inside?
What's fascinating here is that the author anticipates that exact skepticism. He addresses it through the lens of human psychology, specifically quoting the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Oh, what did Nietzsche say?
He famously said, "Belief is a desire not to know."
A desire not to know. That's powerful.
It really is. According to Lina's framework, breaking the trance isn't just a matter of reading the right document. It requires a terrifying amount of personal courage. To wake up, you have to willingly confront paradigm-shattering information that tells you your entire life, your education, and your understanding of the world are built on a fabricated foundation.
Which most people just can't handle.
The book argues that most people instinctively flinch away from this. The psychological pain of that realization is simply too immense, so people choose the comfort of the trance over the terror of the truth.
Okay, so if we accept the premise of the book, that we are all in this manufactured trance, we have to look at who is swinging the pendulum, who built the stage set.
And when did they build it?
Right. The book traces the architectural origins of this global manipulation back centuries, landing squarely in the Middle Ages with the Knights Templar.
Yes. While Orthodox history generally views the Templars as a Christian military order established in 1118 by Hugues de Payens to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land, Architects of Deception paints a vastly different picture.
A much darker picture.
Very much so. The author claims that the Templars were actually a deeply subversive esoteric group that gathered forbidden knowledge during their time in the East. And crucially, he asserts that when the Templars were supposedly disbanded, they didn't disappear.
They just hid.
Exactly. They simply went underground and eventually evolved into the foundational structure of modern Freemasonry.
And the book's core argument is that their method of control wasn't just about hoarding gold or influencing kings. It was shockingly literal.
Literal in what sense?
The author claims they built their control into the physical environment around us through something called geomantic architecture. Now, when I first read that term, I immediately thought of feng shui.
That's a common comparison.
But Lina goes way deeper into physics and earth sciences.
He does. The text describes geomancy not just as superstition, but as an ancient science of placing buildings in perfect alignment with the universe's natural energy flows.
Like an energy grid.
Exactly. The book discusses the golden mean, a mathematical ratio found throughout nature that supposedly dictates aesthetic harmony. It also introduces the concept of Curry lines and Hartmann lines.
Which are what, exactly?
The author describes them essentially as the nervous system of the planet, an invisible grid of electromagnetic earth currents. According to Lina, ancient builders who understood this could design structures that function almost like acoustic sounding boards, amplifying the Earth's positive energies to elevate human consciousness and promote spiritual well-being.
He uses the Gothic cathedral in Chartres as a prime example of this positive architecture. He claims the man who commissioned it, Bernard of Clairvaux, really understood these sacred geometries.
And the result is palpable, according to the book.
Right, resulting in a building that actively elevates the human spirit when you walk inside it. And it wasn't just buildings. The author even points to the traditional medieval clothing of Estonia.
The clothing? That's surprising.
Yeah, he notes that their garments were meticulously designed using the golden mean and balancing colors, like wearing one blue trouser leg and one green one, just to harmonize the body's personal energy field.
That is a level of detail you don't usually hear about.
But then, the book claims, a massive shift occurred. The author asserts that Masonic forces deliberately hijacked this ancient knowledge and inverted it.
This is a cornerstone of the book's thesis. Lina argues that modern architecture, urban planning, and even contemporary fashion trends are not the result of evolving tastes or economic efficiency.
No, it's a weapon.
Exactly. He claims they are deliberately orchestrated by these secret societies to be physically ugly, structurally disharmonious, and energetically blocking.
But how does an ugly building actually control someone? I get that a brutalist concrete office block is depressing to look at, but the book is claiming it's an active weapon. That's a huge leap.
Well, according to the internal logic of the book, human beings are deeply sensitive, energetic receivers. The author argues that if you force the masses to live and work in environments that are mathematically out of sync with natural laws—
Places that ignore the golden mean.
Right, environments that disrupt those Curry lines— their minds and spirits become trapped in a state of low-frequency stress.
Like background static.
Exactly. A population that is spiritually stunted, constantly fatigued, and surrounded by disharmony is vastly easier to manipulate and control than a population living in vibrant, energetically uplifting environments.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the author says it's not just the shape of the buildings. It is the highly specific occult symbols embedded within them, just hiding in plain sight.
He spends a lot of time analyzing Egyptian obelisks placed in modern Western cities, doesn't he?
He does, and he focuses heavily on the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. The book notes that the monument is exactly 555 feet tall.
And there's a numerological significance to that in the book.
Oh, a very dark one. Within the context of the occult numerology that Lina attributes to Freemasonry, he claims that the number 5 is the symbol for death.
So 3 5s.
Represents murder. The text argues that the placement, dimensions, and shape of these obelisks are not just neoclassical decorations. They are active instruments in a vast, invisible network of magical warfare.
The scale of what he is proposing is just mind-bending. He's saying that the entire physical layout of Washington, D.C., with the Capitol building positioned to the east and the Masonic Grand Lodge to the north, is a giant magical circuit board.
And the book claims this isn't ancient history either. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
There's a highly specific, very bizarre claim in the book that on May 31st, 2000, the Masonic elite actually activated this grid.
Activated it.
Lina asserts they transmitted a magical frequency of exactly 1.2 oscillations per minute along these natural Earth lines.
Yes, and the text describes the alleged effects of that frequency in very physical terms.
What does it do to a person?
The author claims that this specific oscillation rate acts on the human nervous system like a spiritual drug, producing a disorienting effect akin to ingesting belladonna.
Belladonna. That's a powerful hallucinogen.
Right. The purpose of this, according to the book, was to blanket humanity in a subtle field of confusion, lowering our collective resistance and artificially inciting conflict and anxiety.
I have to admit, when I read the phrase magical frequency, my modern rational brain slammed on the brakes. I mean, I think for most listeners, the word magic implies fairy tales and wands. How does the author expect us to take that seriously in the context of global politics?
To understand the author's argument, you have to look at how he redefines magic. He doesn't frame it as pulling rabbits out of hats. Lina categorizes it into white and black magic.
What's the difference in his view?
He defines white magic as actions and sciences that work in sympathetic harmony with the laws of nature, like the implosion technologies we'll discuss later, to elevate life.
So working with the universe.
Yes. Black magic, conversely, is defined in the book as the application of immense willpower, hidden knowledge, and symbolic resonance to forcefully manipulate reality and subjugate others.
And he firmly places Freemasonry in the latter category.
Entirely. While modern Freemasonry publicly presents itself as a benevolent, humanist, and charitable fraternity, Architects of Deception claims this is merely an outer shell.
A front to deceive people.
Right, designed to deceive the lower-ranking initiates and the public. The book asserts that at the absolute highest hidden degrees of the order, the elite worship an entity they call Jabalon.
Jabalon. Who or what is that?
Lina describes this figure as the great architect of the universe, whose nature and teachings are deeply aligned with Luciferian principles.
Like devil worship.
Well, the book interprets this not necessarily as a cartoon devil with a pitchfork, but as a philosophy of supreme ego, materialism, and rebellion against natural spiritual order. The text argues that the ultimate directive of this black magic is to sever humanity's connection to its true historical memory and spiritual potential.
Okay, so we have this incredibly intricate foundation. The author has built a world where a global elite utilizes sacred geometry, architectural manipulation, and occult numerology to keep the masses docile and locked in a consensus trance.
It's a vast web.
But how does that esoteric philosophy translate into the actual bloody, boots-on-the-ground historical events that shaped our modern world? I mean, Section 3 of the book tackles exactly this, and it essentially attempts to rewrite the entire 20th century.
It really does.
The book makes the explosive claim that Freemasons and the Illuminati were the secret, coordinating puppet masters behind almost every major geopolitical upheaval of the modern era.
It is a massive pivot in the book. The author introduces the Illuminati, noting it was founded by a man named Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria in 1776.
Right around the American Revolution.
Exactly. According to the text, this group infiltrated the Masonic lodges and began executing a multi-century plan. The book argues that major political movements, things we are taught were organic uprisings of the working class or natural philosophical evolutions, were actually synthetic, artificial constructs.
Right. So they were engineered.
Yes, Lina asserts that the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the devastating conflicts of both world wars were intentionally engineered by these secret societies.
He specifically points the finger at a group called the Grand Orient of France. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, the Grand Orient is a very real, historically significant network of Masonic lodges in Europe, known for being deeply involved in secular politics.
Unlike the more apolitical British lodges.
Right, but Lina takes their political involvement to a terrifying extreme. He claims that ideologies like communism, socialism, and modern globalism were deliberately designed in these lodges.
They weren't meant to liberate people.
Not at all. They were weaponized sociological tools deployed to destroy national traditions, obliterate the nuclear family, and ultimately enslave populations under a centralized bureaucratic state.
And the book brings in historical quotes to back up this assertion about the destruction of memory. Lina quotes Karl Marx directly, citing the phrase, "If you can cut people off from their history, they can be easily persuaded."
That is a chilling quote in this context.
It is. The author frames this not just as a philosophical observation by Marx, but as the literal operating manual for the elite.
He also points to the famous British author H.G. Wells. Most of us know Wells as the godfather of science fiction, the guy who wrote The War of the Worlds and The Time Machine.
But the book focuses on a nonfiction work of his.
Right, a book Wells wrote called The Open Conspiracy. Lina argues that the public mistakenly viewed this book as utopian theory, when in reality, it was a leaked blueprint.
A blueprint for what?
The text claims Wells was detailing an actual ongoing strategy for creating a global dictatorship initiating massive population reduction, dissolving sovereign borders, and executing what the author chillingly calls the murder of the human soul.
This overarching theory of orchestrated history allows the author to present radical, alternative narratives for incredibly specific modern events. The book doesn't just stay in the 18th century, it dissects the late 20th century with the exact same lens.
Like the ferry disaster.
Yes. Take the sinking of the ferry Estonia in 1994, which is one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in European history.
Right. The official accepted truth, the consensus reality, is that the disaster was caused by a catastrophic mechanical failure of the ship's bow visor in heavy seas.
But Lina completely rejects that.
Totally. The book claims that independent metallurgic analysis of the recovered debris proves the ferry was actually sunk by a massive, deliberate explosion. He frames it as a covert operation that was subsequently covered up by multiple governments to protect the perpetrators.
The book also ventures into the heart of the Cold War space race. It bluntly asserts that Yuri Gagarin, the Soviet pilot celebrated globally as the first human being to journey into outer space, never actually left the atmosphere.
Wait, he claims the whole thing was fake.
Yes. Lina characterizes the entire Gagarin mission as a cosmic lie, a desperate, massive propaganda hoax manufactured by a technologically backward Soviet state.
That is wild.
What's even more provocative is the book's claim that Western intelligence agencies knew it was a fake, but deliberately kept quiet.
Why would they keep quiet about their enemy faking a triumph?
To maintain the terrifying illusion of a competitive space race. The book argues that this illusion justified massive defense spending and societal control on both sides of the Iron Curtain.
And you cannot talk about 20th century alternative history without touching on November 26, 1963. The book dedicates significant space to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Unsurprisingly, Lina entirely rejects the Warren Commission's conclusion of Lee Harvey Oswald acting as a lone gunman.
Right, but he goes much further than standard mafia or CIA theories.
The text posits that Kennedy was executed in a meticulously planned, military-style ambush involving multiple snipers positioned around Dealey Plaza.
And who does he blame for coordinating it?
The book claims this was a high-level conspiracy orchestrated by a coalition of Masonic forces and, specifically, the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad.
And to support the claim of a massive cover-up, the author points to the enduring medical mystery of Kennedy's missing preserved brain.
A very dark detail.
The book argues that the brain was deliberately stolen from the National Archives because it contained absolute forensic proof, based on the trajectory of the bullet fragments, that the fatal shot could not have come from Oswald's position in the book depository.
The author also goes to great lengths to emphasize the sheer, visceral brutality of the forces managing this timeline. He doesn't just describe them as corrupt politicians, he paints them as profound psychopaths.
Yeah, the cruelty is a big theme.
There is a deeply disturbing anecdote in the book about the Soviet secret police, the NKVD, operating in Kaunas, Lithuania in the year 1940.
I remember this part. It was rough to read.
Lina writes that these political officers would literally trap their perceived enemies inside massive, heavy fishing nets.
Just on the street?
Yes, and then drag them behind vehicles through the cobblestone city streets. He uses this horrific visual detail to illustrate that the elite don't just want administrative controls, they actively feed on the sadism and terror inflicted upon the populace.
But stepping back, looking at this massive mosaic of claims, I find myself asking the logistics question. I mean, we are talking about faking the space race, assassinating a U.S. president, blowing up civilian ferries, and managing street-level terror in Eastern Europe.
It's a lot to coordinate.
How on earth does the book explain the mechanism of control? How does one single group hold all these wildly different strings without the whole thing collapsing under its own weight?
If we connect this to the bigger picture the author is painting, he solves that logistical problem by describing the elite structure not as a single smoky room of men sitting around a table, but as a decentralized network of networks.
Wow, okay.
The book points to specific, highly exclusive, hyper-elite lodges that operate far above standard government oversight. Two prime examples he uses are the infamous P2 Lodge in Italy.
Which was a real thing, right?
Yes, a real historically documented pseudo-Masonic organization involved in massive corruption scandals. And the other example is Club 45, which he refers to as the Red Lodge of Vienna.
So it's like a hydra, many heads.
Precisely. According to the text, these overlapping networks utilize three primary tools to coordinate global events seamlessly.
What are the tools?
First, essentially infinite financial resources through control of central banking systems. Second, absolute dominance over the international press conglomerates, which allows them to dictate the consensus trance in real time. Third, systematic, highly organized blackmail. By having compromised, fiercely loyal brothers strategically placed in the intelligence agencies, judicial systems, and media boards of every major nation, they don't need to micromanage every event.
They just pull the right levers.
They just set the parameters, and the network executes the reality while the public remains none the wiser.
According to Lina, this manipulation isn't confined to politicians and news anchors. It bleeds directly into the scientific community and our physical health.
This is a really unsettling part of the text.
It really is. This brings us to a fascinating and deeply concerning section of the book regarding hidden knowledge and suppressed technology. The author argues that beneficial, revolutionary technologies that could liberate humanity are deliberately buried by this elite network.
Just to keep us dependent, weak, and chronic consumers.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? How are they burying it?
The author builds this technological argument on a really profound philosophical distinction between two types of physics. He calls them implosion technology and explosion technology.
I have never heard physics described that way.
The book notes that almost our entire modern industrial society is built on explosion technology. We burn coal, we ignite fuel in combustion engines, we violently split atoms.
Everything is about blowing things outward.
Right. It is a paradigm of pushing outward, generating immense heat, depleting finite natural resources, and polluting the environment in the process. The author argues that this destructive paradigm is not an accident of scientific evolution. It is a deliberate choice forced upon us by the controllers.
Because if you control the finite resources, the oil, the coal, the uranium, you control the world.
Absolutely.
Conversely, the book champions implosion technology, which it claims operates on the exact opposite principle. Implosion works in absolute harmony with the natural, inward contracting movements of the universe.
Like a whirlpool or a vortex.
Exactly. And the prime historical example the book offers is the story of Victor Schauberger.
Who was he?
Schauberger was a brilliant Austrian forester and naturalist. According to the text, by closely observing the natural movements of water in pristine mountain streams, he decoded the physics of implosion.
Just from watching nature.
Yeah. The author claims Schauberger successfully developed revolutionary implosion engines and turbines that didn't require traditional explosive fuel. Instead, they essentially generated self-sustaining energy by harmonizing with the natural contracting forces of water and air.
But we don't drive cars powered by Schauberger turbines today.
No, we don't. And the book claims this because these inventions were deliberately and ruthlessly suppressed by Masonic and corporate forces. A technology that provides free, limitless, and decentralized energy to the masses completely destroys the economic monopoly of the elite.
And Schauberger is framed as part of a much larger pattern of suppression. The book also details the work of Julio Pinto Silva and his invention called the train limb.
The train limb?
Yes. Lina describes this as a revolutionary transportation system, a linear engine train that utilized the tracks themselves as part of an active magnetic field.
Oh, like magnetic levitation.
Sort of, but even more advanced. The text claims it was completely silent, required minimal energy, and moved at incredible speeds. According to the author, independent engineering experts highly praised the design, but it was abruptly rejected and buried by hostile socialist elements within the government infrastructure.
They were just ordered to kill the project.
Yes, to maintain the status quo.
He also brings up Nikola Tesla, which is a name many listeners will recognize in the context of suppressed inventions.
Tesla is a huge figure in alternative history.
For good reason, according to the book. It asserts that after Tesla died, his most advanced, environmentally friendly, and paradigm-shifting documents were immediately confiscated.
By the government.
Lina claims they were stolen and locked away by the FBI, acting in concert with Masonic international bankers like J.P. Morgan, specifically to ensure that humanity never gained access to the technological independence Tesla envisioned.
That same principle of forced dependency, according to the book, is relentlessly applied to the human body itself.
This is where it gets really personal for the reader.
It does. Architects of Deception features an extensive litany of alternative health claims, arguing that the medical and pharmaceutical industries are weaponized against the public. The text champions figures like Hulda Clark.
Who is she?
She was a controversial alternative practitioner who claimed to have discovered remarkably simple natural cures for incredibly serious diseases, including cancer and AIDS.
That is a massive claim.
The book asserts her protocols relied on removing parasites and avoiding industrial solvents, but that she was systematically harassed, arrested, and silenced by the mainstream medical establishment.
Just to protect the profits of the sickness industry.
Exactly. The book's critique of public health policies is blistering. Lina quotes Olaf Lindell, a Swedish professor, who unequivocally states that the mass addition of fluoride to municipal drinking water and toothpaste is a massive toxic fraud.
A fraud. But we're always told it's for our teeth.
The book asserts that sodium fluoride does not protect teeth, but is actually a dangerous, accumulative poison that actively harms the neurological health of the populace, making them more docile.
Making us easier to manage.
Right. And the author continues this thread by highlighting the alleged severe dangers of heavy metals, specifically the mercury used in amalgam dental fillings.
The silver fillings.
Yes, which he claims slowly poisons the brain. Furthermore, the book points to ubiquitous artificial sweeteners, like aspartame, categorizing them not as dietary aids, but as neurotoxic substances deliberately approved and pushed onto the public despite known health risks.
So if we pause here and ask the obvious question, why? Why would the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world actively want to pollute the very air they breathe and poison the water supply of the nations they rule?
It seems counterintuitive.
It really does. But the book's underlying philosophy provides a chillingly rational answer for the perspective of a tyrant.
How does he rationalize it?
Lina argues that a populace that is perfectly healthy, technologically independent, and spiritually vibrant is fundamentally impossible to control. They don't need the state, and they can't be frightened into submission.
So they have to weaken us.
Therefore, the text argues, the Masonic elite must mandate toxic additives in our food and water. They must push a paradigm of pharmaceutical dependency, and they must violently block free energy technologies.
It's the only way to maintain the power imbalance.
According to the author, maintaining an ironclad economic monopoly on fossil fuels, combined with a physiological grip on a weakened, chronically sickened public, is the only mathematical way a tiny elite can maintain absolute power over billions of people.
Which brings us directly into the modern era and what the book claims is the ultimate, terrifying endgame of all this historical, scientific, and psychological manipulation.
The endgame. Where is this all heading?
The author warns that the final, overarching goal of these secret societies is the complete and total dissolution of all sovereign nations. They are driving us toward a unipolar world dictatorship, a concept frequently referred to as the New World Order.
To illustrate how this is happening right in front of us, the book examines the European Union.
Yes, and Lina doesn't portray the EU as a flawed but well-meaning economic alliance.
Far from it. He frames it as a deliberate, meticulously planned Masonic superstate. The author argues that the massive, faceless bureaucracy of Brussels is designed with one specific purpose: to systematically strip European citizens of their unique national traditions, their localized democracies, and their spiritual identities.
Forcefully merging everyone into a homogenized, easily managed collective under central rule.
And the methods used to frighten nations into surrendering their sovereignty to these globalist structures are, according to the book, incredibly dark. The author claims that the elite don't just wait for crises to happen.
They manufacture them.
They actively manufacture massive traumatic events to shock the public into giving up their civil rights. The book explores the September 11 attacks through this lens, making the explosive claim that 9/11 was a highly technical, completely planned operation.
A bogus Pearl Harbor, as he calls it.
Yes, Lina asserts it was orchestrated from the inside, using deep cover agents and simultaneously running military drills that confused the defense grid.
And the goal?
The goal, the book claims, was to create a trauma so deep that the public would willingly justify endless foreign invasions and the draconian stripping of domestic liberties.
The book also dives into how the public's consent for these foreign wars is artificially manufactured through the media, providing a stark historical example. Lina points to the lead-up to the Gulf War.
Oh, the incubator testimony.
Yes, specifically referencing the infamous congressional testimony regarding Iraqi soldiers allegedly removing premature babies from incubators in Kuwaiti hospitals.
Right. That testimony shocked the world. I mean, it completely galvanized support for military intervention.
Exactly, but the author highlights the subsequent revelation that this harrowing testimony was completely fabricated.
It was entirely made up.
It was orchestrated by a massive New York public relations firm that was paid millions of dollars to emotionally manipulate the American public and lawmakers. The book uses this documented event as proof of concept.
To show what?
Showing the reader exactly how easily the consensus trance can be Directed, scripted, and weaponized by those with enough money and media access to dictate the narrative.
And the book's vision of where this is all heading gets even more dystopian from there. Lina warns that the next phase of the New World Order is the push toward a fully surveilled, physically microchipped society.
He talks about the Verichip. Right.
He explicitly mentions the development of the Verichip. It's a transponder microchip, roughly the size of a grain of rice, designed to be injected directly under the human skin.
Just like tagging an animal?
Yes, and the book claims that this biometric technology, when combined with a ubiquitous grid of satellite monitoring, represents the ultimate, terrifying fulfillment of the elite's centuries-old desire.
Which is?
Absolute, inescapable, real-time control over the physical body and location of every human being on Earth.
Listening to all of this, the sweeping narrative of the book is undeniably suspenseful. It reads almost like a cinematic cyberpunk thriller, except the author is presenting it as the absolute truth of our daily lives.
It's intense.
In Lina's framework, democracy itself is nothing more than a meticulously manufactured illusion. He firmly believes that citizens in the modern world are not actual empowered participants in their own governance.
We're just an audience.
We are merely spectators sitting in a dark theater, watching a play managed and directed by invisible propagandists.
And this raises a deeply important question for you, the listener. Regardless of how extreme you may find the claims in this book, how much of the news you consume on a daily basis is the product of genuinely critical, independent, investigative journalism?
And how much is simply accepted consensus handed down from centralized PR firms and official spokespeople?
Exactly. Architects of Deception forces the reader to aggressively interrogate the sources of their own beliefs and to look critically at the immense structural powers that filter and deliver information to the masses.
As we conclude our exploration of this massive text, I want to leave you with one final, surprisingly striking concept from the book's conclusion.
What's that?
Despite the overwhelming darkness of the conspiracy he outlines, Jüri Lina believes that this grand global manipulation actually has a cosmic expiration date.
An expiration date. When?
Referencing his interpretation of the Maya calendar, the author asserts that the current dark era of human history is slated to end in the year 2012.
2012.
Lina's underlying philosophy is that the inherent tyrannical evil of Freemasonry and globalist control has reached a critical, unsustainable mass. Because this system operates entirely against the natural, harmonious laws of the universe, the book concludes that it will inevitably, spectacularly collapse and destroy itself from within.
It is a massive, incredibly complex, and highly controversial vision of the world. And our challenge to you, the listener, is to let the ideas from this book enhance your life in practical ways.
You don't have to agree with everything to learn from it.
Exactly. You don't have to accept the author's conclusions about the Illuminati or the moon landing to use his framework as a powerful tool for critical thinking. We challenge you to actively question the consensus trends in your own life.
Pay attention to your world.
Look closely at the aesthetic harmony of your surroundings, the buildings you live in, the food you eat, the media you passively consume. Ask yourself who benefits from the narratives you are told. And above all, fiercely protect your own spiritual and intellectual independence against any force, public or hidden, that demands your blind conformity.
If these concepts intrigue you, if you want to see the documents and the historical arguments he uses to build this massive theory, we highly encourage you to engage with the author, Jüri Lina, on social media.
Join the conversation there. Furthermore, we ask that you purchase a copy of Architects of Deception to explore these detailed claims firsthand. Dive into his footnotes, read the primary sources he cites, and make up your own mind about the architecture of our reality.
We also want active participation from you right now.
Yes, we want to hear your thoughts. What is a historical event or a widely accepted official truth that you've always felt in your gut might be part of a consensus trance?
Is there a narrative in the news or a chapter in the history books that just never logically sat right with you?
Let us know in the comments below. Let's get a debate going.
It's an important conversation to have.
Thank you so much for joining us for this expansive, mind-bending conversation on the Playing Books podcast. We appreciate you exploring these controversial waters with us. Please invite your friends to follow, subscribe, and share the Playing Books podcast so we can keep bringing you these profound explorations. We'll see you next time.